Hey guys, how's it going? So today is going to be a response video. I got tagged in a video by the Isolated Gamer asking me what my top 5 retro games are. Now, top 5 lists are really hard to come up with, especially when you're talking about video games, at least for me. I have so many favorites and just it's impossible to just choose from the hundreds that I've played. So I decided to take one game out of each generation going up to the PlayStation 1. These are going to be my top games that I had for each system. Without further ado, let's get into it.
Is that Italian?
No, Bandicoot, it's an Australian name.
Crash Bandicoot 2 for the PlayStation 1. Now, Crash Bandicoot 2 was one of my very first games I ever had for the PlayStation. It is by far one of the best platformers and one of the most underrated games when you're talking about PS1 games, at least nowadays. You don't ever hear people talk about Crash Bandicoot very much, at least within the circles that I know. Crash Bandicoot is just one of those games where you get ultimate joy and pleasure just playing this game. It never gets old. I mean, it's one of those games, if you go across your gaming library with game and it just grazes your finger, you're like, oh man, I gotta pull this out and play it now. Blaster Master by Sunsoft for the NES. This game is one of the greatest games on the NES, at least when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I could sit here and play this game for hours. I mean, my dad loved it. It was one of those fond memories where me and my dad would sit down and just play this game. I love how this game switches from a 2D platformer to a top-down shooter, basically. And if you didn't know, I love mech games. The fact that you have a mech in this game and that you can jump out of it and go around, kill enemies, and go explore dungeons by yourself, and then jump back in the mech and go kick some ass is really cool. This was a high competitor with Metal Mech for the NES, but Blaster Master is still one of my favorite games for the NES.
Hey, little buddy, want to ride? Pikachu! Yeah, whatever!
The original 3 Pokemon games for the Game Boy. Now, as a kid that grew up in the 90s, Pokemon was one of the greatest games that ever came out on the Game Boy. Hands down, at least for me. I had each version growing up. I had the books, I had the trading cards, and sure, it was a cheap marketing ploy by Nintendo to get you to buy the 3 versions so you could just trade them around. I would literally stay up for hours in my bed with the really little shitty Game Boy Light. If you had a Game Boy in the 90s, you know that they weren't backlit. So I would sit there with my shitty little Game Boy Light in the dark, hours after my parents had gone to bed, sitting and trying to catch different Pokemon. I mean, that's how hardcore it was. And how many times, I can't tell you, how many times I fell asleep with the Game Boy on and lose all of my progress that I did that night. Resident Evil 2 for the Nintendo 64. Out of all the kids I ever knew growing up, I spent the most time on Resident Evil 2. I could beat this game. No joke. I could literally speed run this game by the time I was in the 5th grade in under 4 hours. That's how much I played this game. I knew it like the back of my hand. I would sit at my grandparents' house and me and my little brother would just sit and I would play this game non-stop over and over again. First the Leon campaign, then the Claire campaign, then Leon B, and then Claire B. Getting all the different weapons, seeing all the different endings, unlocking all the different mini-games. Resident Evil 2 was my favorite and is still one of my highly rated Nintendo 64 games.
It's the game that's already a legend.
The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Now, I know that there's going to be people out there going, wow, what a generic answer for your number 1. Well, I'm sorry. Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past was an extraordinary game. It still is. One of the best Zelda games that ever came out to date. This is my favorite Zelda game. Growing up as a little kid, I got to watch my dad play this game. And I would just sit there for hours and be like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And then finally, I would get the controller handed over to me. I explored this game non-stop. The best thing about this game is you could play it over and over again, especially when you're a little kid and you don't know anything any better about going around and collecting every single item in the game. Because you could beat this game without getting every single heart container, every single weapon or item in the game. So it gave you hours of replayability of just trying to find the different things you missed. Legend of Zelda today is still one of my most highly recommended games for anybody who's looking to get into Super Nintendo collecting, or who has never, if anyone has never played this game, that is a Zelda fan, you need to go find this game today. This is one of the best Zelda games, and it's always going to be one of the best Zelda games. I don't care if they remake this game and reboot it completely for a current platform system. The Super Nintendo version is the best one ever created, and that is why it is my #1 game. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this top 5 video. Shout out to TheIsolatedGamerz. He makes great content. The link to his channel will be in the description below. He does game reviews on pretty much everything, just like my channel. He's got a pretty cool accent. He reviews Game Boy Advance games, and his reviews are actually pretty informative. And that's one of the big things I look for when I'm watching a game review, is how informative you can be when you're reviewing a game. It's almost like a history lesson, and I like being informed. So yeah, TheIsolatedGamerz, I highly recommend his channel. Go check him out. Anyway guys, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button, and let me know in the comment section what your top 5 retro video games were. Anyway guys, this is Heavy Handed Gamer. Have a good night.